In just 60 seconds, 4 men destroyed a roof, defied an entire crowd, and witnessed something that would forever change the definition of impossible. But what you're about to discover isn't just a miracle. It's about the hidden power that can transform your most desperate situation in 60 seconds. In the next few minutes, you'll understand why this story isn't just religious. It's the most powerful formula to break down any barrier blocking your life. Get ready, because after today, you'll never accept no for a final answer again. And when everyone says it's impossible, you'll know exactly what to do. Oh, and if you want first access to the most powerful revelations I share here, hit like now and subscribe to the channel. Because whoever does so will receive an exclusive notification every time I reveal biblical secrets that can transform impossible situations into real miracles. Don't miss this opportunity. Now, prepare your heart, because you're about to discover the secret that made 4 ordinary men move the impossible, and how you can use that same power today. Capernaum, a city where miracles happened like the sunrise. But on this day, something different was in the air. Jesus was in the house. And when Jesus was in the house, the impossible became inevitable. But there's something you need to know about crowds. They can be your greatest blessing or your greatest curse. And for 4 men carrying a paralytic, that crowd became the greatest obstacle between them and the miracle. Here's the question that will define the next 50 minutes of your life. What do you do when everyone says it's impossible? When the crowd blocks your path? When the doors close and there's no hope? These 4 men discovered something that 99% of people never discover. And you're about to discover it too. But first, you need to meet the man at the center of this story. His name? The Bible doesn't say. But I'll tell you something few know about him. He wasn't born paralyzed. Imagine for a moment. A man who once walked, ran, danced. A man who worked with his own hands, who embraced his family, who dreamed of the future. This wasn't a birth defect. This was a tragedy that destroyed an entire life. The Bible doesn't reveal the exact details, but the historical context tells a dark story. Perhaps a construction accident, perhaps a fall from a height, perhaps a degenerative disease that gradually robbed him of his mobility, or perhaps something even worse. What we do know is that this man knew the difference. He knew what it was to walk. He remembered what it was like to be independent. And this made his paralysis not just a physical limitation, but a daily emotional torture. For someone who had never walked, paralysis is an accepted reality. But for someone who once ran freely through the countryside, each day without movement was a cruel reminder of what he had lost. In that society, being paralyzed meant more than just being unable to walk. It meant being a burden to one's family. It meant relying on the charity of others to survive. It meant being seen as cursed by God. It meant being rejected, ignored, forgotten. For years, this man woke up every day to the same cruel reality. The same legs that didn't respond to his brain's commands. The same hands that needed to be carried from place to place like unwanted luggage. The same pitying looks from the people who passed by. But then, something changed. News reached his ears. Jesus of Nazareth was in the region, and the stories that came with that name were no ordinary stories. They were impossible tales of paralytics walking again, blind men regaining their sight, dead men rising from the dead. For the first time in years, a spark of hope lit in that man's heart. But there was a problem. How does a paralyzed man reach Jesus when Jesus is surrounded by crowds? How does someone who can't move alone cross an entire city to find a man surrounded by hundreds of people? The answer came in the form of 4 extraordinary men. These 4 men had something that 90% of people today don't. And no, it's not faith. It's something rarer, more powerful. They had radical commitment. The difference between faith and radical commitment is simple. Faith believes something can happen. Radical commitment makes it happen, no matter the cost. You know people with faith. They pray, they believe, they hope. But when difficulties arise, when obstacles multiply, when everyone says it's impossible, they stop. But radical commitment doesn't stop. Radical commitment doesn't take no for an answer. Radical commitment finds a way when there is no way. And if there is no way, radical commitment creates a way. These four men looked at their paralyzed friend and made a decision that would change not only his life, but would define for all of history what true friendship means. Who were these men? The Bible doesn't give us their names, but the historical context allows us to imagine. Perhaps they were fishermen, accustomed to hard work and creative solutions. Perhaps they were carpenters, knowledgeable about structures and construction. Or perhaps they were simply ordinary men who refused to accept the impossible. What we do know is that they weren't rich. If they were, they would have bought a special ticket or bribed someone to clear the way. They weren't influential. If they were, they would have used political connections to reach Jesus. They were men of the people, manual laborers, simple people with extraordinary determination. The decision wasn't easy. Carrying a paralyzed man for miles to the house where Jesus was teaching would have required physical strength, perfect coordination, and, above all, an unwavering determination to never give up. But they did something few would do today. They took full responsibility for their friend's life. Not partial responsibility, not occasional help, but a total commitment to do whatever it took to lead that man to the solution. Think about it for a moment. How many people do you know who would do this for you? How many people would literally carry your weight when you can't walk alone? How many people would sacrifice their time, their energy, their public dignity to ensure you reach your miracle? And here's the hardest question. How many people would you do this for? The journey began early that day. 4 men, a makeshift stretcher, and a paralyzed man who barely dared believe what was happening. The path was not easy. Dirt roads, rocks, uphill, downhill, under the scorching midday Palestinian sun. With each step, the responsibility grew heavier. With each kilometer, the temptation to give up grew. With each curious glance from passers-by, the social pressure grew. But they kept going. And then, they reached the house. The situation was worse than they imagined. It wasn't just a small gathering. It was a crowd. Hundreds of people crowded together, pushing and shoving, fighting for every inch of space to see Jesus, hear Jesus, touch Jesus. The doors were blocked by human bodies. The windows were inaccessible. Every possible entrance was occupied by people who had arrived early and secured their seats. This was the moment of truth. This was the ultimate test of radical commitment. The crowd looked at them, and the message was clear. You're late. There's no room. Go home. 99% of the people would have turned back. 99% would have said, at least we tried. We did our part. It's not our fault we couldn't get in. But radical commitment accepts no excuses. Radical commitment doesn't understand the word impossible. And then, one of them looked up. In the architecture of that era, roofs were flat and accessible. They were made of wooden beams covered with a mixture of clay, straw, and small stones. They were strong enough to withstand rain, but they were not indestructible. What they did next wasn't just audacious, it was prophetic. Because sometimes, to achieve a miracle, you have to destroy what's blocking your path. Think about it. How many times in your life have you stopped before obstacles that seemed insurmountable without realizing that perhaps the solution wasn't to go through them, but to go over them? How many times have you given up on a dream because the front door was closed without considering that perhaps there was an entry through the roof? The symbolism is profound. The roof represented the established structures, the unwritten rules, the social protocols that said, this is how things work, this is how it's done. Who are you to break the rules? But they broke the rules. Climbing onto the roof was already an act of courage, but deciding to destroy it, that was revolutionary. Imagine the scene. 4 men carrying a paralyzed man to the top of a house. The logistics were complex. How to climb. How to position the paralyzed man safely. How to ensure he wouldn't fall during the operation. But they found a way. And then they began to destroy. Every broken piece of clay was an act of faith. Every removed beam was a declaration of war against the impossible. Every handful of straw ripped out was a proclamation, we will not give up. Down below, the crowd began to realize what was happening. Pieces of the roof began to fall on their heads. Dust spread throughout the room. The noise of the destruction interrupted Jesus' teaching. Imagine their reactions. Indignation. Who are these vandals? Disbelief. They're going to destroy the house. Curiosity. What's going on up there? Jesus stopped speaking. The entire crowd looked up. And then, they saw something no one expected. An opening appearing in the roof. First small, then larger. And then, ropes descending. And at the end of those ropes, a paralyzed man being lowered slowly, carefully, directly to Jesus' feet. The silence was total. 3, 4, maybe 500 people sat in complete silence, watching that man descend from heaven like a wounded angel, deposited exactly where he needed to be. And Jesus looked. But it wasn't the paralyzed man he saw first. He saw something that shocked the whole crowd. He saw their faith. Seeing their faith. The Bible is specific. It wasn't the paralytic's faith that first impressed Jesus. It was the faith of the 4 men who destroyed a roof, defied social conventions, and created a miracle of human logistics to bring their friend to a solution. This is one of the most powerful lessons you can learn today. Your faith can activate a miracle in another person's life. Your determination can break down the barriers that are preventing someone you love from achieving their healing. Your radical commitment can be the difference between someone remaining in a desperate situation or finding the way out that will transform everything. But then Jesus did something no one expected. Everyone in the crowd knew what the next sentence would be. It was obvious. It was logical. It was what anyone in the situation would do. Get up and walk. But Jesus' first words were something completely different. Something that revealed the true power behind all miracles. Your sins are forgiven. The impact was immediate. Murmurs spread through the crowd like wildfire. The Pharisees present were furious. The scribes began to question in their hearts. Who is this who speaks blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone? Why did Jesus begin with forgiveness instead of healing? Because Jesus sees beyond the physical. He sees the spiritual. He understands that often our greatest prisons are not the limitations of the body, but the guilt of the soul. That man carried more than physical paralysis. He carried years of questioning. Why me? What did I do to deserve this? What sin have I committed for God to punish me like this? In the minds of that time, illness was often seen as divine punishment. Disability was considered a sign of a curse. That man was not just physically paralyzed. He was spiritually paralyzed, believing he deserved his suffering. Jesus attacked the root first, not the symptom, but the cause, not the effect, but the source. Your sins are forgiven. Translation: you are not being punished. You are not cursed. You do not deserve your suffering. You are free from the guilt you have carried all these years. But the Pharisees exploded. Blasphemy! Only God can forgive sins. The tension in the room was palpable. On one side, a paralytic experiencing spiritual freedom for the first time in years. On the other, religious leaders accused Jesus of heresy. The crowd was divided. Some agreed with the Pharisees. Others sensed something supernatural was happening. And Jesus knew exactly what they were thinking. Why do you think evil in your hearts? Which is easier to say, your sins are forgiven, or get up and walk? The question was brilliant. Because anyone can say, your sins are forgiven. There's no way to immediately prove whether it happened or not. It's a matter of faith. But get up and walk, that's immediately verifiable. It either happens or it doesn't. There's no middle ground. Jesus was about to do something that would silence all critics once and for all. But that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins. The crowd held their breath. Jesus turned to the paralytic and spoke 7 words that forever changed the definition of what was possible. Get up, take your bed, and go home. The silence was total. 500 people held their breath. Time stood still. And then, movement. First, a barely perceptible tremor in his right leg. Then, a muscle twitching in his left thigh, his toes wriggling for the first time in years. The man looked down in disbelief. His legs were responding. With effort, he placed his hands on the ground. He pushed himself up, and slowly, very slowly, he stood. The crowd erupted. Cries of astonishment, tears of emotion. People fell to their knees. Others ran to tell the news. But the most impressive thing wasn't just that he got up. It was that he picked up his bed. The same bed that had carried him for years, he now carried. The symbol of his limitation became the symbol of his victory. And he walked. Not just a few staggering steps. He walked steadily, with strength, as if he had never been paralyzed. Up above, on the roof, 4 men watched in ecstasy. Mission accomplished. Radical commitment rewarded. The crowd, once an obstacle, now became a witness. Every person present became a spokesperson for the impossible. And the Pharisees, silenced, because there is no argument against a public and indisputable miracle. The impact of that day spread throughout the region. The story of the man who descended through the roof became legend. But more than that, it became hope for all who face impossible situations. So, what does this mean for you today? Because this story didn't happen 2,000 years ago to be locked away in a book. It happened to be repeated in your life. First revelation. When the crowd blocks your path, remember, there is always an entrance through the roof. The problem isn't the lack of a solution, it's the lack of creativity to find it. How many times have you given up on a goal because the obvious route was blocked, without considering alternatives? How many times have you accepted no as a final answer, without exploring other possibilities? The 4 men teach us that conventional thinking produces conventional results. But extraordinary results require extraordinary methods. Your promotion didn't come through the front door. Look for the entrance through the roof. Create value so uniquely that it's impossible to ignore. Are your relationships experiencing insurmountable barriers? Find creative ways to reconnect. Destroy the pride that's preventing communication. Does your financial situation seem hopeless? Stop doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Think outside the box. Find your entrance through the roof. Second revelation. The 4 friends didn't just carry a paralytic. They carried a responsibility. Who are you carrying? And more importantly, who is carrying you? One of the great tragedies of modern society is extreme individualism. Every man for himself. It's not my problem. I'm not obligated to anything. But life's great miracles rarely happen individually. They happen when extraordinary people take extraordinary responsibility for each other. Look around you. Is there someone in your life who needs to be carried to their miracle? Someone who can't get there alone. It could be a child who needs guidance, a spouse who needs support, a friend going through a crisis, a coworker who's being wronged. Radical commitment means taking full responsibility for another person's success, no matter the personal cost. But be careful. Don't confuse this with codependency. Codependency carries people who can walk alone. Radical commitment carries people who genuinely can't move without help. And here's something that can change your life. When you carry someone to a miracle, you too are blessed. The 4 men didn't just watch the miracle, they participated in it. Third revelation. Jesus didn't just see the need, he saw faith. And your faith doesn't have to be perfect. It just needs to be active. Many people don't experience miracles because they wait until they have enough faith before acting. But faith isn't a feeling. Faith is an action. The 4 men didn't feel a supernatural peace before they began. They probably felt fear, doubt, and questioning. But they did it anyway. Active faith says, I don't know how it will work out, but I'm going to start moving in the right direction. Active faith says, I don't have all the answers, but I have enough to take the next step. Active faith says, even though I'm afraid, I'll do what needs to be done. What is the ceiling you need to break today? What is the barrier that's preventing you or someone you love from achieving the miracle? What is the social convention, the unwritten rule, the established protocol that's blocking your path to the solution? Maybe it's fear of judgment. Maybe it's wounded pride. Maybe it's the comfort zone that has become a gilded prison. Whatever it is, remember, miracles happen when ordinary people do extraordinary things. Miracles happen when you stop accepting limitations as definitive. Miracles happen when you make a radical commitment to your own destiny or the destiny of someone you love, and miracles happen when you have the courage to destroy what's blocking your path to the solution. Now you have a choice. You can be part of the crowd blocking miracles, or you can be one of the 4 who make miracles happen. The question isn't whether Jesus still performs miracles. The question is, do you have the courage to destroy the roof? If this story touched your heart, if you felt something move within you, don't let this moment pass you by. Share in the comments. What is the roof you need to break today? And if you want to continue discovering biblical secrets that transform the impossible into the possible, like now and subscribe to the channel. Because those who do so receive firsthand the most powerful revelations that can completely change your perspective on God's miracles in your life. And remember, miracles don't happen to perfect people. They happen to determined people. The paralytic who descended through the roof teaches us that sometimes the only difference between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one is 4 people willing to carry you where you need to go. And sometimes you are one of those 4 people in someone's life. The choice is yours. The miracle is waiting, and the roof is within your reach.